If you like stories, tonight is going to be something special. I'll be honest with you, when it comes to this parasha every year, Parashat Vayishlach, I always try to give over something, at least something new, on the great bout between Yaakov Avinu and the Sar Esav, as he went back to get the Pachim Ktanim. Now already last week's parasha, we already highlighted that those little jars weren't just insignificant jars. Those jars had the oil that was inside the stick of Yaakov Avinu, which he used that oil to learn Torah 14 years, for day and night, until finally the beginning of last week's parasha, which was the first night in 14 years that Yaakov Avinu decided to go to sleep. We had an entire shiur on that. But the oil that he used to anoint the rock as a matzeva, the oil that he used to be able to learn 14 years, day and night in Shem Va'ever, was later on, says the Shachal Torah, the oil that he went back for in those small jars of the Pach Shemen. Later on, those jars of the Pach Shemen that he went back for was the very Pach Shemen that shows up in the time of the story of Chanukah, the miraculous one jar of oil left that was untouched. That came from the oil of Yaakov Avinu, and that was the oil of the Nes of Chanukah. It was the oil of the Torah of Yaakov Avinu of 14 years. That's unbelievable. And when he went back for those jars, and he went back for that oil, he went back for the oil that kept his Torah going for 14 years. And that's why the holiday of Chanukah is the holiday of Torah. Because it was the Torah oil that the miracle took place 8 days, 8 nights. And that's why this is the holiday of the learners of Torah. En ora ela Torah. That's amazing. And now you understand why the Sar Esav shows up. Because when you go back to get the oil that's going to kindle the light of Torah, that's the moment he always shows up. Like the Chafetz Chaim says, the Yetzer Hara is okay when it comes to mitzvot. Matter of fact, he'll even bring you mitzvot to do just to get you to stop learning. Because he knows the gig, he knows the deal, he knows the score. He knows ner mitzvah v'torah or. He knows the light of a mitzvah is the light of a candle, but the light of Torah is the light of the sun. He'll trade you 10 cents for $1 any day of the week. Anytime. Anytime. And because of that, the moment the light of Torah is about to flourish, he's there to try to shut it down. And that was the great bout that took place between Yaakov Avinu and the Sar Esav. Amazing. And every year we say this tremendous idea about Lama zeh tish'al lishmi. The Sar Esav asks Yaakov Avinu, why do you ask me my name, right? Yaakov Avinu bests him at the end of the night because no one can beat Torah. Yaakov Avinu's Torah. Nothing, the Yetzer Hara, his kryptonite is the Torah itself. Yaakov Avinu beats the Yetzer Hara because Yaakov Avinu's Torah. Right? Barati Yetzer Hara, ubarati lo Torah tavlin. The Torah is the antidote that kills the Yetzer Hara. Yaakov Avinu kills the Sar Esav, puts him in a headlock, and doesn't let him leave. Till finally he says, Ma shemecha, lama zeh tish'al lishmi. Why do you ask me my name? And over the years we always ask, time and time again, Yaakov Avinu, you know who he is. Why are you asking him his name? And the Sar Esav said, well, what? Lama zeh tish'al lishmi. But we said that magnificent pshat. And this is where we're going to start tonight's class, because tonight I'm taking a wild left turn. Wild left turn. If you like stories, tonight I'm asking Borei Olam to give me the siyata d'shmaya, to give this over right. Lama zeh tish'al lishmi. Says the Sar Esav, what does it matter what my name is today? Tomorrow, I'll come right back at you with another name. Today I come at you with one trick, tomorrow a different. And even if you beat me today on my game of today, tomorrow I'll come back with a new trick, with a new game, with a new name. And one generation, he's communism, fascism, socialism. Other generations, he has all different types of names. Like the famous Gemaran Sukkah, that the Yetzer Hara has 7 names. Every day he comes back the next day with a new name. 7 names, 7 days. You beat him today under this name. He comes back tomorrow under a new LLC, under a new name. Every day he comes back with another name. He's like the flies in this room. He comes at you this way, you swing at him, then he comes at you the other side. The Gemara says that. The Gemara says, Yetzer Hara's domel zvuv. He's like a fly. That's why they're here tonight. Because they know which parsha this is. They know we're talking about the son of Esav. And they want to hear. They want to hear, how did you guys best us? How did you guys get us? And the answer is, we know your secret. Because if he comes to you on this side, you swing him this way, all he does is come back on a different angle. But he keeps coming back again and again and again. He just changes up the angle. He just changes up the technique. He just changes up the name. Lama ze tish'al lishmi. What does it matter what my name is today? Tomorrow I'll come at you with a different name. What does it matter? One day my name is Facebook. Tomorrow my name is, Twitter, WhatsApp. It'll be something else in social media. Every generation it's a different name. It's a different gig. It's a different plan. It's a different technique. But I'm going to try to get you one way or another. And even if you beat me on one side, I'll just come back the next day with a new plan. Amazing. But Rabotai, let me tell you something. You might not know this, but tonight is a very special night. And because of that, I decided to take a left turn. And I'm asking Borei Olam to give me the words. We're in a week of great tzadikim. Tonight is the yahrzeit of Rebbeinu Hakadosh, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. And if you want to talk about Yaakov Avinu, you want to talk about Rebbeinu Hakadosh. Rebbeinu Hakadosh, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. You know why he was called HaNasi, says, Migalei Amukot? Because the word Nasi is Rashi Tevot, Nitzotz Shel Yaakov Avinu. That's why he was called Nasi. Because he was the Nitzotz of Yaakov Avinu's Neshama. A Gilgul of Yaakov Avinu. Rebbe, Rabbeinu HaKadosh. Amazing. Tonight is the yahrzeit. In the parashiyot of Yaakov Avinu, tonight is the yahrzeit of Rebbe. I want to tell you an amazing life story of Rebbe. We just came from a tremendous yahrzeit, and I had a wedding on Monday night. A very close Talmid, so I was not able to give the share Monday night. But Monday night was the yahrzeit of the Bataan. Rebbe Avram Dov ben Reb David me'Avrich, the Avritcher. He was a Bal Mofet, he was a tzaddik, Yisod Olam Mamash, the Bataan. If you read his Sefer, you see the secrets, Bikdusha v'Tahora. He lived in Tzfat. I'd like to tell you 2 stories tonight. One is about the Bataan that very few people know, and one is about the history of Rabbeinu HaKadosh tonight, on the night of his yahrzeit. And listen to me, you guys came the right night. Let me tell you why. I have a promise from a great tzaddik in Israel that every time the story I'm about to tell you over right now about the Bataan, every time the story is said over, it creates an et ratzon in heaven. And the minute the story is said, we're going to take 60 seconds for everybody in this room to close their eyes and daven. I have a promise from my Rebbe, Rebbe Shalom Rabinovich, that this ma'aseh I'm about to tell you now about the Bataan, which is a family story. It's not something that's well known. There are many well-known Bataan stories, but this one is from the inner circle. It's from his family, the Rabinovich family. But once this story is given over, and this is so too for the people at home that's watching, whether you be live, whether it be wherever you're going to see this one day, the minute this story goes over, it creates in Shamayim and Et Ratzon for Yeshuot. I don't understand how these things work, but I'll ride the wave if you give it to me. Lob the ball in, I'll take a swing at it. So we're going to take 60 seconds when we're done the story. Everyone's going to daven for something of a Yeshua that they want. You came the right night. Listen to the story. The story of the Bataan. The yard side of Monday night. And then after that we'll go to the history of Rebbe. Tonight's yard side. Because tonight as well I have a second gift for you. We're giving out gifts tonight. Came the right night. Not toasters. Not microwaves. I have a second gift for you tonight. Because tonight, the biggest segula is an unbelievable et ratzon on the yard side of Rebbe for ashirut and ruchaniyut and gashmiyut. Because Rebbe was not just the greatest rabbi of his generation, he was the wealthiest man, one of the wealthiest men of his generation as well. A lot of people don't know that. Rebbe's yard site tonight is a segula gidola. For ashirut, in ruchaniyut means in Torah. Ashirut in Torah. Can you imagine that? To be a multi-billionaire in Torah. And in ashirut in wealth. Both. In one night. Not bad. Not bad for one night. So let's get this going. You ready? Listen to this. Let's start first with the first yard site, the Bataan. Lately, somebody called me and says, "You're really into yard sites lately? What's going on? You're telling over a lot of Hasidic stories, a lot of, what's going on here?" These are tzadikim, unbelievable tzadikim Yisod Olam, the Bataan. I don't know if you guys remember, Monday night, we put out a huge spread with a big Su'udah, Lilu Nishmat the Bataan, for the Yeshuot of everybody. We all should be zocheh. Rabotai, open your hearts, listen to this beautiful story that I heard from my Rebbe about the Bataan. The Sabrainer of big tzaddik in Europe, he used to give on Erev Yom Kippur, once a year, this big tish, this big shiur on Erev Kippur. You know, on Erev Kippur there's a mitzvah to eat, right? So you know what they used to do? In Sabrain, this was the place where he was. They made, right after tefillah in the morning, they would pray early, Erev Yom Kippur. And then right after that, they would do Hatarat Nedarim. And then right after that, they do Hatarat Kelalot. And then right after that, everyone would sit down to this big tish, this big shiur, and they would put out so much food that the entire town would come to this big brunch. And everyone would listen to the Torah of the Rebbe. And they would eat and eat. It was a mitzvah, Erev Kippur, to eat as much. They would eat and eat. It would be a feast. One year, on Erev Kippur, in the middle of this big feast, in the middle of the Tish, the Rebbe sang over unbelievable Torah from Shamayim. All of a sudden he stops, the Sabrainer of, he stops. And he looks at the crowd, and he says, "Rabotai, right now there's such a fire in heaven. There's such an et ratzon in Shamayim. We could be po'el, Yeshuot, for anyone here who needs." You hear this? Who needs a Yeshua? Come up to me right now. An old man comes running up to the front. Now I'm talking about an old man. This is an elder yid, an old man. He comes up to the Sabraina and he says to him, "Can I get a beracha for a baby boy?" I said, he's an old man. He's asking for a beracha for a ben zachar that year. So the Sabraina looks at him and he says, "But du bist an elder yid, you're an old man." He says, "But you said, and Yeshuot. And Yeshuot means even an old man." The Sabraina says, "He's right. That is what I said. And if that's what I said, then if you take a certain amount of money and give for the chesed of almanot yitomim and certain amount of money for pidyon shivuim, I promise you, you're going to have a son this year. So the man takes out the money and he says, Rebbe, I'm ready right now to do it. And the Rebbe says, but there's one condition, that this boy that you're going to have needs to be born in Eretz Israel. Because this is a very special boy, special neshama. This neshama cannot be born in Chutz La'aretz. He needs to be born in Eretz Israel. If you're ready to move now to Eretz Israel, after you give the tzedakot that I told you, you'll have a son, a very special son this year. This old man decides, if this is what the rabbi says, that's what he's going to do. He gives the tzedakot, almanot yitomim, pidyon shvuyim, and him and his wife picks up and they move to Israel. They move to the city of Tzfat. And at the end of that year, he has a baby boy. And he names his baby boy Binyamin. The day of the Brit Milah comes. And they're doing the Brit Milah on this baby boy Binyamin. And right after the Mohel does the Brit Milah, the boy is bleeding. And bleeding. And the bleeding doesn't stop. So people start panicking. Even the Mohel starts panicking. The bleeding is not stopping. Now remember, this was the miracle baby. This is a very old man with a very old wife who didn't have children for 30 years. And now out of the blue, they have a child. Out of the blue, they had the Sabrina Rav's bracha, but they had a child that year, a miraculous kid. And this little baby, named Binyamin, by the Brit Milah, the bleeding doesn't stop. They called the doctors, nobody can stop the bleeding. They realized a miracle baby, who do you take him to? A tzaddik, a miracle worker. They grabbed the baby, wrapped the baby up, the baby was hemorrhaging. The baby was, God forbid, going to, hashalom, to bleed to death. They wrap up the baby and they run to the other side of the town of Tzfat. And they bring the baby wrapped up to the Bataan, to the great Rebbe Avram Dov ben Reb David, the Bataan, the miracle worker, the great tzaddik. They come into his house and they run into his study. And they see a stender there with a Gemara. There's no rabbi. Where's the rabbi? They ask his wife, where's the Rav? She says, he's not in his study. No, he's not there. She says, I don't know. He vanished. What happened to him? They're looking. They go outside. They see from the fields that the Ayin, the rabbi, is walking back from the fields, from the forest. They're thinking, what in the world is the great rabbi doing in the forest? He's walking back and he has a big smile. They run up to the rabbi. They say, save this child. Save this boy. This is Binyamin, the miracle child. The bleeding of the Brit Milah, it's not stopping. He's hemorrhaging. The Bataan quickly takes the baby. He holds the baby. He takes the baby into his room. He puts him down on his bed. He has the baby wrapped up. He closes his eyes. He starts to daven. The bleeding stops. The Bataan tells the people, leave the baby here for a few hours. Let him stay here with me in my room while I'm learning. The bleeding stopped, but keep him here with me. This is a special baby. Keep him here. They said, okay. But they said, Rav, before we leave, where were you? What were you doing out in the forests? Even your wife didn't know you left. Where'd you go? You know what he answered? Open your hearts, you have to hear this. He says, in the back of the Gemara, you find over there on the Rif, on Rabbeinu Elfas, in the back of the Gemara, at the bottom of the page, you have the Balamor, and you have the Ramban, but there, his title is the Milchames, the Milchemet Hashem. There are two Pirushim side by side that actually are constantly fighting against each other over the pshat of the reef Rebbeinu Elfas brought on the top of the page. Many times their machloket is on the Gemara itself. You have the Balamor and you have the Ramban in the Melchamet Hashem. The Balamor is constantly attacking and asking on Rebbeinu Elfas's psak, and the Ramban is constantly defending. And it's an ongoing machloket hundreds of times. That's why he named the Pirush Melchamet Hashem, the Melchamis, the Melchamet Hashem. It was a war for the sake of God. It was a war of Torah. One rabbi is attacking and the other rabbi is defending. The Balamor and the Melchamis. They're constantly fighting in Torah, in halacha, in machloket. Says the Bataan. In Shamayim, they wanted to know, after all those mesechtot and all those machloket between the Balamor and the Ramban in Melchamet Hashem, constantly arguing with each other throughout the entire Shas, Lamaisa, who's right? Who was right and who wasn't? And they had a big vikuach in the heavenly court. Which one was right? There was a war going on. Who won the war? Melchamet Hashem. That's what the name of the Pirush is. The Melchamis. Melchamet Hashem. Who won the war? The Balamor? The Ramban? Shammai wants to know, who do we go with? At the end of the day, hundreds of machloket throughout Shas. Who is right? Shamayim decided, in heaven, we cannot make this hachlata. Lo ba shamayim hi. We have to go down to earth and find a great Talmid Chacham who lives in Eretz Yisrael, Dafka. Let him be the Machriya. He said, they called on me to come out to the Yar, to stand in front of the Balamor and the Melchamet Hashem, the Ramban, and be Machriya. Do you hear this? Do you hear this? To be Machriya. Who has it right and who doesn't? I was busy. I was busy. The Bataan. Amazing. When they heard that, they let him be. They kept the baby in the room. The baby was there for a few hours while he continued to learn Torah. That evening, the mother, the father came back. They picked him up, picked up the baby. He was healthy, cured, and he went home. A few years later, this boy, Binyamin, grew up. And now he's a young boy. He's going to Cheder, he's going to Yeshiva. He's going to Yeshiva in Tzfat. That's where they lived. This miracle boy. One day, him and a few friends are coming home, and there was a ditch. In those years, guys, they had public wells. A well. It was like a ditch, and there was water inside. And these public wells, sometimes, weren't exactly kept up properly and weren't really secure. So the kids sometimes, when they see this open well, which is basically a hole in the ground filled, it's a bore filled with water. So what do kids do? They start fooling around. So they start jumping over the well, trying to see if they can jump from one side of the ditch to the other side of the ditch without falling into the water. And as they're jumping over, this Binyamin with his friends are jumping from side to side. And he took a slip on one jump and he went straight into the water. And he went down. Just then his friends saw that he went straight down. They started to scream, somebody, Hatzilu, Hatzilu, save him, help him. He went down in the water, he's not coming up. There was a guy that was not too far away who hears the yelling and screaming. A guy from Tzfat, a Jew from Tzfat, he comes running to find out what happened. They scream to him, a boy fell in the water, fell in the bore, fell in the ditch. He comes running with a ladder. He comes running with a rope to try to get down as quickly as he can to pull the boy out. He's under there already for a few minutes. They're not expecting good results. He throws down the ladder. They're holding it from the top. He grabs a rope. He makes his way down the ladder. He feels down at the bottom of the bore as well as he could under the water. He feels the boy's leg. He grabs the boy and he pulls him back up the ladder and out of the bore. And as he brings him out of the bore, the boy starts spitting up all the water. And he starts coughing and coughing and coughing. And he's in a daze. They quickly grab the boy. They wrap him up in blankets. Who do they take him to? The Bataan, of course. Who else are you going to take him to? They take him all the way to the house of the Bataan. The Bataan sees the boy wrapped up. He looks and he says, Nachama, you're bringing me this boy again. It's the same kid. This was the boy from the Brit Milah, right? That the bleeding didn't stop. Now it's the same kid years later, the one who fell in the water. He's wrapped up again in towels, brought to the Bataan, save his life. He says, oh, again? He takes the boy, puts him on his bed, opens up his Gemara, he starts to pray, he starts to learn. A few hours later, the parents come running, the Bataan says he's okay. The boy is sitting there shivering, but he's talking. His face isn't blue anymore. His color came back. And the Bataan says, Binyamin, tell me, when you fell in the water, in the bore, and you started going all the way down to the bottom, did you see any rabbi down there with you? And the boy said, yes, I did. He said, describe to me, what did the rabbi look like? What did the rabbi look like? He starts describing the rabbi in detail. This type of beard, with this type of eyes, with this type of kippah, with this type of levush. He describes the rabbi exactly. So the Bataan is smiling and he's shaking his head as if he knows what's coming. And the Bataan turns to the father and he says, you know who he's describing, your son? You know who was down there in the bore that kept him alive for the 5 minutes that he was underwater? You know who miraculously kept him alive? He just described to you the Sebraina Rav, the one that gave the beracha in the first place to you to have this child in old age. Because he gave you the beracha to have the child, he came to be shomer the child at the time where has v'shalom, you almost lost his blessing. And this is a warning. Be careful with this child. He's a special child. Bataan number 2. Amazing. Binyamin's father was very wealthy. He was the guy that was giving out tzedakah to the whole city of Tzfat for years. It came to a point where the family ran out of money because they gave it all away to tzedakah. Amazing. Binyamin now is a young man, very smart, super clue, very sharp, smart kid, young man, already in his 20s, not a kid, 20s. He decides the kuppah is very low. And they're the ones that are supporting the whole city. If he doesn't go out to Chutz La'aretz to raise money, how are they going to continue to support all the aniyim of the whole city of Tzfat? Do you hear this? This family supported the aniyim of the whole city of Tzfat. You're going to find out in a minute who this family is. Wait, don't worry. So Binyamin goes and travels out to Europe. This is the first time in his life he leaves Eretz Yisrael. He comes to Europe and he meets the Rebbe Melech. The Rebbe was intrigued with this boy. He saw on him a light. He saw he was special. At the end of that week, there was a Jewish religious Talmid Chacham who was like an investment banker. He was like the type of guy that people would give over money for him to put out and invest. He was a smart man. He understood business. He understood investments. And he would invest an enormous amount of money for all the different people. And he would bring them beautiful returns. And he would help people with their parnasah because he was a very bright man, this banker. Religious man, a Talmid Chacham. It turns out that the investments of that year did not look good. And he realized that he's about to lose not just his money, but the money of the entire city that they were in. His whole investment strategy was about to go belly up. He was about to go bankrupt. And he said to himself, me is one thing, but everybody else who put me money in the city, I'm going to bankrupt the entire city on a bad investment that I made that's going to hurt all the other investments. He comes running to Rebbe Elimelech. He said, Rebbe Elimelech, I need everyone to leave. I need to tell you something in private. Because if anybody hears that his investments are about to go belly up and bankrupt, everyone's in trouble. They're all going to what's called take a run on the bank, right? You heard that term, right? And they're going to destroy the situation worse. He gets everybody out. He comes to Rebbe Elimelech. Listen, I'm about to go bankrupt. Nobody knows, just me and you. And not just me. This is the money of the whole city. All the Jews in this city, we're all going to go crash. They put their money by me. Save me! Help me! There got to be something you can do. Save us all. Rebbe Elimelech closes his eyes and he thinks. He calls his gabbai into the room. He says to his gabbai, you know that younger man, that boy Binyamin, that just came from Eretz Yisrael, that younger man, I just met him. Call him here right now. Tell him it's an emergency. Rebbe Elimelech wants to speak to him. Binyamin comes running. He hears that tzaddik wants to talk to him. The boy in his 20s. He comes into the room. Rebbe Elimelech sits down and he says, Binyamin, du bist a kliger. You're a kluger. You're a smart boy. You're a sharp boy. You're a smart kid. You were blessed with Hashem, with a brilliance. I want you to give me an eitzah. And he tells him the problem. This man here, he's a big Talmid Chacham, a religious Jew, a Yireh Shamayim. He went and invested his money and the money of all the Jews in the city. He's about to go bankrupt. Everyone's going to lose. What do you think we should do? Binyamin closes his eyes and he's thinking. And he says, if the Rebbe permits me to talk, he gives me reshut to speak, I want to tell the Rebbe what I would do in this matzav. He says, please, I want to hear. He says, I know that this man, the investment banker in this city, has a brother. His brother's in Vienna. His brother is much wealthier, much richer. He's also an investment banker, both brothers. He's also an investment banker, but that brother in Vienna is not so religious. Not so religious. He keeps Shabbat barely, but he's not a Shomer Torah mitzvot Jew. Very traditional. The tzniut and everything else that goes on and then by him is not where it should be. Not like this brother. This brother here in this town, he's a religious Jew, Yireh Shamayim, big Talmid Chacham. He says, but the brother in Vienna, the even richer brother, he's not as religious. He says, Rebbe, isn't it going to be a terrible chil Hashem that people are going to see two brothers? One Shomer Torah mitzvot, and he's Talmid Chacham, and he's religious. And his wife is sanua, and his children go to yeshiva, and he's a real Talmid Chacham, and he loses all and everyone's money. And the brother who's hardly religious, hardly Shomer Shabbat, hardly bichlal with the program of Judaism, and he is so much more matzliach and so much wealthier, isn't that going to be a patch in the face of Klal Yisrael? Isn't that going to be a chilul Hashem? He says, Rebbe, if I was here in your position, what I would do is I would flip the galgal. I would flip the galgal. I would have the brother in Vienna with all his riches and wealth come to the brother here who's about to go belly up. He's about to go bankrupt. And the bankruptcy of the brother here should go to the brother in Vienna. And he says, and then, when the galgal flips, and the brother in Vienna, he goes bankrupt, the religious brother here in this town, who's doing fantastically well suddenly, is going to travel to Vienna, and he's going to be Makarev, his non-religious brother. He's going to pay off all his debt. He's going to bring him here to this city. He's going to put him up in a beautiful house. He's going to show him that the way of Hatzlacha is with Hashem, Torah mitzvot. He's going to put his kids in yeshiva. Like this, the brother in Vienna will end up with his money again, but this time with his kids in yeshiva, with his house shomer Shabbat, with an unbelievable toilet for both sides. If I was you, Rebbe, that's what I would do. Flip the galgal. Rebbe Melech was smiling. He says, sharp, such a smart kid, such a klugger. So where'd you come up with this cheshbon? He tells him. Where did you come up with this cheshbon? Where'd you come up with this brilliant? The Rebbe says, shine! That's it. And everybody left. At the end of that week, the news hits. The brother in Vienna went bankrupt. And suddenly the brother in the town of Rebbe Elimelech became unbelievably well. All those investments that looked like they were on the brink of bankruptcy flew something out of the ordinary, ridiculous wealth. And sure enough, the religious brother picks up, goes to Vienna, pays off all the debt of his non-religious brother, and then's Makarev him. Tells him, come, leave Vienna, the big city. The nisyonot here are too difficult. Come to my town. We have a tzaddik Rebbe Elimelech by us. We have beautiful yeshivot. We have beautiful batei sefer, beautiful shuls. Come to live a good Jewish life. And you'll see, I'll give you the wealth and more. He brought his brother from Vienna back to the town of Rebbe Elimelech. He said, Lezhensk, go on one of these towns. He bought him this magnificent house, paid off all his debt, put his kids in yeshivot for the first time. His wife started mingling around proper people. She became sanua. The brother became Talmid Chacham, learning in the mornings, going into business with his brother from the... The plan was flawless, and it was genius. The Rebbe gave Binyamin a bracha, and he said to him, from you, Klal Yisrael is going to see you short. The way you helped in this Yeshua. And Binyamin went back to Tzfat. This Rebbe Binyamin had a few daughters. And one of those daughters married a tzaddik from the Rabinovich family. And he named his son Binyamin Rabinovich, the father of my Rebbe, Rebbe Shalom. Unbelievable. Amazing how this family has been bringing Yeshua to Klal Yisrael for so many years. From the Bataan all the way down to today. Unbelievable. That's the first segment. The other segment I wanted to tell you guys was something beyond words. And that is tonight. Oh, I promised, wait one second. My Rebbe told me when we say over this Maisa, there's a tremendous et ratzon in Shamayim to ask at that moment for Yeshuot. So we're going to take 60 seconds. Everyone, you close your eyes. You daven for your Yeshua. Right now, there's an et ratzon in Shamayim. You at home, do the same thing. Tonight is the yahrzeit of Rebbeinu Hakadosh, Rebbe. I just want to quickly tell you a little bit of the life of Rebbe, Rebbeinu Hakadosh. And then we'll be zocheh to another tremendous Sigula Yeshua tonight of Ashirut, Ben Beruchaniyut to Ben Begashmiyut, which is what we need. For 19 years, Antoninus was the emperor of Rome. In those 19 years, 17 years out of 19, there was a very clandestine friendship between Antoninus and Rebbe, Rabbeinu Hakadosh. Rebbe Yehuda HaNasi, which was known as Rebbe in Klal Yisrael, he was the first one to be called Nasi. Even his father was Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel was not called Nasi because the emperor of Rome did not allow it. But because Rebbe was so close to the next emperor, Antoninus, and they had this 17-year friendship together while he ruled, Antoninus gave the power over the yeshivot and over the Torah of Klal Yisrael back to the rabbinate where it belonged. Until then, Rome took over the control of the yeshivot. Rome took over the control of the Torah. And you understand what they did to it. Like the Chazir, they perverted it. Now finally Antoninus comes into power. He gives the power of Torah and the yeshivot back to Rebbe Yehuda HaNasi, to Rabbeinu Hakadosh. And Rebbe is now crowned as the Nasi of Klal Yisrael, with, of course, Borei Olam's Hashgacha, through the friendship of Antoninus. Antoninus was in Caesarea. Rebbe was in Sipore. He had an underground tunnel that went from his castle in Caesarea underground all the way to the house of Rebbe in Sipore. And he would visit Rebbe nightly. And in a moment, we're going to get into that incredible story. But there is an amazing story to this, where every night, the prophecy, V'rav Ya'avod Tza'ir. Every night, Antoninus would come from his castle. He would leave the castle with a soldier walking him through the tunnel. Actually, he'd leave the castle with two soldiers walking him through the tunnel. As he would come all the way down to the house of Rebbe, one soldier would enter the house with him and he'd kill him, as not to tell the secret where he went. He would stay all night and learn Torah with Rebbe. Antoninus would get down on all fours and Rebbe would step on Antoninus' back to step up to get onto his bed, to be Mekayim the prophecy, V'rav Ya'avod Tza'ir, and Esav will worship or will be the Eved of Yaakov. And then at the end of the night, Antoninus would go back with the other soldier through the tunnel, and as he would come up through the door of his castle, he would kill the other soldier. He would do this for years. Every night he'd waste two soldiers. That's unbelievable. Just to keep the secret a secret. It's amazing. This went on for years. And they would learn Torah all night. Later on, Antoninus would be Megayer. He would convert to Judaism. And he would literally learn Torah with Rebbe Yomam Valayla. It's unbelievable what took place here. What's the story behind this? What was the story of Rebbe? Rabotai, listen to this. Tosafot and Avodah Zarah, Daf Yud Amud Bet tells us, and all the Mar Mekomot that I'm about to bring to you now comes from a share, an amazing share that I heard from Rabbi Daniel Gladstein, and I want to give over to you the Mar Mekomot. It's just a quick synopsis of the points. L'chvod, tonight, the yahrzeit of Rebbeinu Hakadosh. I wanted to tell over the story of Rebbe. It starts with the Gemara Tosafot, actually, on Daf Yud Amud Bet. The Gemara tells us that at that time, the Roman emperor made a decree and he banned Brit Milah from Klal Yisrael. Anyone found circumcised was killed on the spot. No Brit Milah. It turns out that Rebbe's parents, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, they had a baby boy. They had a baby boy. And now, what are they going to do? How are they going to give him a Brit Milah? So they went in hiding, and they did a circumcision, they did a Brit Milah, b'tzin'ah, in hiding. They were literally moser nafsham. They sacrificed their lives to give their son a Brit Milah. After they gave the baby a Brit Milah, somehow or other word got back to one of the goyim in the city, the Hegmon. He was like the governor. And he comes to the house of Rebbe. He comes to the house of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. He says, I know as a fact that you gave a Brit Milah to your baby. He says, I have to report you to the Caesar. I have to send you to Rome and let them deal with it. He puts them on a boat to go to Rome. Before he goes to Rome, and I'm about to give you over now, not the short version of the way Tosafot tells the story, but the longer version, the way the Menorat HaMaor, Rabbi Yitzchak Abuhav, the way he gives over this Midrash with much more detail. And he says that at that time, Rebbe and Antoninus' parents were neighbors. And they were close. And they were friends. And the wife of Rebbe and the mother of Antoninus, the mother of Rebbe and the mother of Antoninus were good friends. They were both friends. When they heard that this baby is about to be taken to Rome, and if they find out he had a Brit Milah, they're going to kill him. So the mother of Antoninus tells the mother of Rebbe, I'll do you a tremendous favor, because we're good friends. I had a baby the same day you did. I named him Antoninus. We'll switch the babies. You take my baby, because he's Arel, he's not circumcised. Bring him up to Rome, show him that he's Arel, he's not circumcised. It'll save your life and your baby. And I'll keep your baby here with me till you get back. We'll switch the babies until you get back from Rome. And like this, it'll save your baby and your life. And that's what they did. Rebbe's mother took baby Antoninus. Together with her, she went up to Rome. She came in front of Caesar, leaving baby Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Rebbe, back in Antoninus' mother's arms. She comes in front of Caesar holding Antoninus. And the Caesar says, I heard that you did Brit Milah to your child. Open up the pamper. Let me see what happened. And she opens up the pamper and he sees he's Arel. At that minute, the Caesar starts yelling and screaming at his officers. Why are you driving this poor lady crazy? You made her come all the way to Rome on a lie? They said, Your Honor, we have witnesses that saw the baby have a circumcision. This is the God of the Jews. He always makes miracles to save them. We saw this baby was circumcised. This is a miracle of the Jews. It's not our fault. We told you it's true. Caesar says, get out of here. He threw them out. And he sends Rebbe's mother back with Antoninus the baby. Now on the way, as any new mother with any infant child, Rebbe's mother, big tzadikim, was literally feeding and nursing baby Antoninus. Baby Antoninus was suckling from the holy milk of Rebbe's mother. Says Tosafot, because Antoninus got from the milk of such a holy tzaddiket of a woman, that he suckled from her gave him the zechut to greatness. Because of that, he was zochet to be the next emperor of Rome. Because of that, he was zocheh later on to learn chavruta with Rebbeinu Hakadosh Torah, and even be zocheh to be megayer and to come tachat kanfei Shechina because a few drops of that milk of such a tzaddiket. This is not the first time we heard that. You know You know the famous Midrash by Sarah Imenu. Sarah Imenu, when she had Yitzchak Avinu, it literally was a mockery. Everyone laughed. What does the pasuk say? Henika banim Sarah, I believe. Banim, she had only one child. Says the Midrash, no one believed that a 99-year-old woman could have a child. So you know what they did? They came from all over and they said, really? You just gave birth to a child? That means you can nurse children now. Here, nurse my child, let me see. Here, nurse my child, let me see. Henika banim Sarah. She ended up nursing hundreds, maybe thousands of children just to prove the miracle of Hashem, Kiddush Hashem. Chazal say that all the kings of all the nations came from those babies that Sarah Imenu nursed. All the kings of all the nations of the world came from those babies that suckled from the milk, the nursing, from the holiest woman in the world at that time, Sarah Imenu. Same thing years later. Antoninus nursed from the mother of Rebbe. He became the next emperor of Rome. He became later on the Chavruta of Rebbeinu Hakadosh because of a few drops of milk. Unbelievable. But wait 1 second, Rabotai. We forgot something. While Antoninus was in the arms of Rebbe's mother nursing, Rebbe was in the arms of the Goya, Antoninus's mother, back at home, nursing from the Goya's milk. Is that allowed? Is that allowed? Can you take a Jewish baby and give it to a Goya as a wet nurse to nurse the child and give the milk? I'm talking about Chalav Stam. This is Chalav Akum. Are you? Okay, it's a joke. Are you allowed to give a baby, a Jewish child, to a Goya to nurse? The halacha is that it's mutar. If there's no one else to nurse that child, you're allowed to. Chalav Mitzrit is kechalav Yisraelit. That's what the Shulchan Aruch paskins. However, says Maran, Mikol makom lo yaniku. You shouldn't. If you can avoid it, don't do it. Because it's mitamtemet alev. Because the goyish milk goes into the baby, it's mitamtem the lev. It does something to the inside. And therefore don't do it. It's allowed. There's no other choice. But avoid it. Don't do it. Why? Like we saw by Moshe Rabbeinu, that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was pulled out of the Nile and they wanted to nurse him, he refused to take from the milk of the Goya. Peh she'atid lidaber ma'shechina. This is the mouth of Moshe Rabbeinu. Chazal say that there was one drop that fell on the lip of Moshe Rabbeinu, and that's why his whole life he was aral svatayim. His whole life. Peh, but he didn't drink it. Peh she'atid lidaber ma'shechina. That mouth is going to suckle from a Goya? No way! And because of that we say, no Jewish child should ever suckle from the milk of a Goya, even a wet nurse. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky was known to ask, that was Moshe Rabbeinu. He was the peh that was atid lidaber ma'shechina. But every Jewish child, you're going to stop him from having the milk of a Goya? Answers Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, you know what you see from here? Every Jewish child is born with the potential to be the next Moshe Rabbeinu. Wow. Wow, wow. Every Jewish child was born with the potential to be peh she'atid lidaber im hashechina panim el panim. Titnaheg kacha. Because that's what he could be one day. Unbelievable. So why taka, guys? So if it's better not to do, why was the hashgacha elyona of such that they had Rabbeinu Hakadosh take from the milk of Antoninus' mother, a Goya? Why would you do that? Why would they have such a thing take place? Listen to this answer, and I'll let you guys go. But it comes with a big bounty, this answer. Listen to this. Yaakov Avinu is about to go into his father to get the berachot. We read this 2 parashiyot ago. Rivka, she has her son put on the clothing of Esav. Why? Why put on the clothing of Esav? What's going on? You think you're going to fool Yitzchak Avinu, Baruch Hakadosh? Wow, says the Khatam Sofer. Says the Khatam Sofer guy is such a bomb of an idea. He says Yaakov Avinu was the Ish Emet. Titen Emet liYaakov. Yaakov Avinu was Emet. And Rivka knew this. Rivka knew that Yaakov Avinu couldn't even white lie. He couldn't even try. He's the Ish Emet. He's going to come in and Yitzchak is going to say, who are you? Who are you? Is he going to be able to say, Ani Esav bincha bechorecha with a pause? Is he going to be able to do that? Ani Esav bincha bechorecha? Is he going to be able to twist it a little? No way! He's the Ish Emet. So you know what she did, Rivka Imenu, says Khatam Sofer? She put on him the clothing of Esav. Because clothing on mashpia. Clothing has an effect on a person when they put on that clothing. And that clothing of Esav will have a tiny effect on the Ish Emet of Yaakov to be able to get him to say something that's a little for the sake of Klal Yisrael. Et la'asot l'Hashem heferu toratecha. He had to save Klal Yisrael. He had to get those berachot. So he had to be heferu toratecha. But how is he going to do it? He can't even get it out of his mouth. So she put him on the clothing of Esav. And for that moment, the Rasha's clothing was able to get the tzaddik to be heferu toratecha and say something a little like this to save Klal Yisrael and get the berachot. Says the Shvilei Pinchas, Rebbeinu Hakadosh had a big problem. He wanted to redact and write down Mishnayot Torah Shebal Peh. Rebbeinu Hakadosh was the nitzotz of Yaakov Avinu. That's why the third blessing in Amidah is Ata Kadosh V'Shimcha Kadosh. That's Yaakov Avinu, because he came back as Rebbeinu Hakadosh. Antoninus was a Gilgul of Esav. And because Esav didn't want to learn in his mother's stomach in Rivka in round 1, he had to come back as Antoninus to learn with Yaakov, his brother, in round 2 every night as a tikkun for the Gilgul of Esav. Antoninus is Esav, Yaakov, Rebbe Hakadosh. And that's going to be the prophecy, V'rav Ya'avod Tza'ir. Wow, 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 wow. And now here's the big moment of truth. Rebbe has a big job. Rebbeinu HaKadosh. He's going to be the one to write down Torah Shebal Peh so it doesn't get forgotten from Klal Yisrael. Et la'asot l'Hashem heferu toratecha. But there's a problem. You're not allowed to write down Torah Shebal Peh. It's one of the lotases. It's a lotase. It's an avera. You're not allowed to write down Torah Shebal Peh. So how's Rebbe going to do this? How is Rebbe going to break the Torah? Where is he going to get the chutzpah to go and break the emet of Torah? Torah says, don't write it down. But he has to. It's going to be forgotten. Et la'asot l'Hashem heferu toratecha. Now's the moment that I got to break the Torah to save the Torah. So you know what Shamayim did? As a baby, they dropped a few drops of milk from the Goya into the mouth of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, and it was mashpia in him, a little bit of a begida, to be able to get him to one day rebel and revolt at the moment that the Torah was meant to be broken, at the moment that it needed to be written down so that it will be saved. So a few drops of milk went from Rebbe's mother into Antoninus to make him the emperor, and a few drops of milk went from Antoninus' mother into Rebbe's mouth to one day get him to do what needs to be done, be derech bigida, rebellion, so that he'll be able to break the Torah, so that he'll be able to write it down and save the Torah from one day being forgotten. Tonight is the night of Rebbeinu Hakadosh. Tonight is the night that we relish in the gadlut of Torah, in the gadlut of the begida of Torah. We should be zochen the zechut of Rebbe for these great ma'alot gvahot of an ashirut in Torah, ben beruchaniyut, u ben begashmiyut.